Good morning, everyone. We appreciate you being here with us today. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is AJ Pepper, and I am a real estate attorney with Snell and Wilmer and have the pleasure of serving as the Legislative Affairs Chair for NAIOP Utah. We want to thank all of you for joining today's webinar, The Dirt on Development. We are honored to and appreciate the Salt Lake Chamber's partnership to bring us such a distinguished panel this morning. I'd also like to thank today's title sponsor, FFKR Architects. FFKR is a full-service architectural planning and interior design firm serving the Western United States since 1976. Their main office is located in the historic Bogue Building in downtown Salt Lake City, and also with a satellite office in Scottsdale, Arizona. FFKR's practice encompasses a broad range of building types and professional services. Distinct studios within the firm itself provide focus and leadership for each area of expertise. FFKR is Utah's largest firm with a staff of 176 people, including 67 licensed architects, 27 interior designers, and 9 landscape architects. Together as a team, FFKR shares the vision and are dedicated to the success of each project. And this dedication can be seen in projects such as the luxury Milagro Apartments, the University of Utah Hospital expansion, the Biofire Manufacturing Facility, and FFKR also serves as the local architectural firm working on the new Convention Center Hotel. I'd also like to thank our chapter sponsors, Zions Bank, Layton Construction, Hamilton Partners, Big D Construction, Colliers, Mortensen, CBRE, Harris Company, and Newmart Knight Frank. Alrighty, let's go ahead and jump into the dirt on development. Today we are honored to have our panelists, U.S. Congressman John Curtis, who represents Utah's 3rd Congressional District and serving on the House Natural Resources and Foreign Affairs Committee. We have Utah Senate President Stuart Adams, whose legislative service to Utah spans more than 18 years. President Adams also serves on 14 different legislative committees. We have Mayor Erin Mendenhall, who was elected the 36th mayor of Salt Lake City in 2019 after serving for 6 years representing District 5 on the City Council. We also have GOED Executive Director Val Hale, who was appointed to the position in 2014 by Governor Herbert. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Hale served 2 years as President and CEO of the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce. And finally, moderating today's discussion, we have Maura Carabello, President and owner of the Exoro Group. She is an advisor and strategist to Utah's top elected officials and business leaders. Maura, go ahead, turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Good Friday morning to the audience and the panelists. I want to tell the audience that some of the instruction that we discussed with the panelists is that you guys are a top shelf group and they want to hear meaty answers beyond the headlines. So I say that to the audience. To the panelists, it sounds like hyperbole, but you guys are a terrific panel. I want to compliment NAIOP for getting all forms of government from local to federal and getting some of our most creative thinkers. So we really, again, appreciate your time. Speaking first of the composition of the panel, I want to ask everybody a question. We'll go to COVID next, so keep that in mind. But I want to ask from your jurisdictional authority, from your role in government, what initiatives or what focuses are you bringing right now from your government level as it relates to the real estate development and construction industry? So I really want to have a jurisdictional start to this discussion from your level. I'm going to start with Congressman Curtis.
Good morning, and I can't even start without acknowledging how honored I am to be here with these other members of the panel. I just have so much respect for each one of them. It's great to be here with you this morning. Let me just share a couple of thoughts. I think federal might not be people's first thought when they think about how it impacts real estate, but let me bring up a couple. Clearly, tax policy is going to be a big deal, and I think the election is going to have an impact on that as well. We're looking at potentially higher corporate tax rates, and that's going to impact companies' ability to expand or to not expand. And so I think that's something to keep an eye on and watch. Infrastructure is also a big topic back here in Washington, and I think that's very, very important as well. And that includes a lot of people, when they think about infrastructure, they think about roads and things that you can touch and feel, but think about broadband, think about 5G. A lot of the tools that corporations will use to telecommute are dependent on 5G and broadband and spectrum and things like that. These are big topics coming up in the next few months and certainly in the next year in Washington, D.C. That I think will have a real big impact.
Thank you. President Adams.
Thank you. Again, I would echo Congressman Curtis's comments. This is why Utah is so great, because we work together, and you can see all areas of government and the private sector coming together to actually solve problems and to handle the challenges we have. I'm actually remote. I'm in Moab, and it's pretty actually. So one of the challenges with COVID is that we have a little difficult time with getting together. It'd be fun to actually be in a room with this group, but we're doing it virtually. But one of the advantages is you can do it from anywhere. So I appreciate that this morning and appreciate being with you. The state of Utah, I think, is leading the way with a lot of different things. And we, looking here in Moab, we're seeing the fact that people want to get out and participate and still be involved in the economy. And that's surely the case here. And one of the challenges is that I'm looking at in this area is infrastructure, and to be able to find a way to fund that infrastructure project. Similar to what Congressman Curtis said, as we grow, and Utah is one of the fastest growing states in the nation, we were giving the award by Rich States, Poor States, which is a national group of economists that actually evaluate the economic outlook for different states. Utah was rated #1 for the 13th year in a row. So as we look forward, they look at tax policy and those type of issues. Probably some of the biggest issues we'll look at as a legislature that will affect this industry is, again, tax policy. And part of those tax policies will not only be the policies that affect the real estate industry, but we have to find a way to fund infrastructure, and we have to do it in a way that continues to allow the economy to grow. And so those will be significant issues that we'll try to tackle and continue to tackle in the next legislative session. We, Utah, as I talk to colleagues around the nation, everybody looks to Utah for leadership. And part of that is not only because of the great legislative leadership we have, but because of the great people we have. So it's a real thrill for me to be, I think, part of my industry. We do some commercial real estate business, but the strength of the Utah legislature is the fact that we all have, it's a part-time legislature, we all have different jobs. And that allows us to be able to see things through not only the eyes of different people, but be able to have firsthand knowledge that the laws we pass and the things we do, we have to go home and live with. So anyway, great to be with you.
Thank you. Well said. While I have you here, it sounds like you will be convening the session in January as normal. Well, nothing's normal, but you'll be starting in January, perhaps at the Capitol. Yes,
we will. And you may be aware that there's a constitutional amendment on the ballot that allows us to vary the starting dates. If that passes, we'll usually start the last week of the January. We'll actually start the third week of January, right after Martin Luther King Day. So we'll be a week earlier, but we will make provisions we hope to do it in person, but it's hard to know the status of COVID. But we will have provisions to do it virtually too. And after so many special sessions this year, we're pretty good at virtual meetings.
Terrific, thank you, Senator. I'm going to stay at the state level. So Mr. Hale, from your perspective.
Yes, well, it's really interesting right now, as it is with everybody, but one of the things that we're dealing with that I'm sure we'll talk about later, so I won't go into a lot of detail, is the future of office space. And as we talk to companies that are looking to expand or to relocate to Utah, one of the questions is, will there be a need for as much office space as they've had in the past, or will remote working be much more acceptable and something that a lot of these companies do? So that's a conversation that we continue to have. I will mention that, we continue to have a lot of interest in Utah by businesses, but that interest has shifted a little bit from some of our technology companies, which have been really, really hot over the last decade, coming to Utah, to where now we have a lot of manufacturers who are looking to come here and are looking for facilities either to build or to take over an existing facility. So manufacturing seems to be revving up. And I don't know if part of that is because of the onshoring of companies and maybe the ongoing issues with China, but we have some real opportunities there. So I think from a commercial real estate standpoint, I think things are going to continue to go pretty well. They may shift a little bit, but I think the demand, as President Adams has mentioned, our economy continues to be incredibly sound. You know, some areas have suffered a little more, but we anticipate that commercial real estate and specifically even areas in manufacturing will continue to grow.
That's great. And we're going to drill down, as you suggested, we'll drill down a little bit more about the shifting needs and the economy. So I'm glad you brought those up. So we'll finish this section where the rubber hits the road at the local level with Mayor Mendenhall.
Thanks, Maura. It is really great to see my friends, Congressman Curtis, President Adams, Val. I miss being in the same room with you all. Maura, always great to see you. Thanks for having me here today. You're absolutely right. Cities are where the rubber hits the road. And I would agree with President Adams that the real strength of this city and this state and our community is that we really we collaborate. We collaborate when it's hard times. We collaborate when it's good times. And even if we disagree, we end up ultimately coming back to the table together to make sure that we get the best possible outcome for our residents. And I think that positions us well in terms of recovery from this pandemic, but it also makes us attractive to new business opportunities as they want to come in. And local government has so much to do with the growth and the ability for our marketplace and our economy to thrive. My administration is focused on trying to harness the growth that's been happening in our city and is continuing to happen gratefully for the good of more of our residents, because connecting people with opportunities doesn't necessarily happen just because your city is growing. So as our city sets land use, runs the RDA, we create housing plans, we have ongoing revenue for affordable housing to partner with that private investment. We maintain a majority of the infrastructure in the city. There is a lot that the city does to create a healthy economy and a quality of life for people here. One of our biggest initiatives that we're taking on is with Tech Lake City. And that endeavor is around really trying to harness the most growing, strong economy industry in the state of Utah, highest paying industry in the state of Utah, and bring more of that into our capital city. I think that the opportunities that, and I know we'll get into this a little bit more around the real estate itself, but that the pandemic is presenting, put Salt Lake City in a great position with the need for space, which has been such a limiting factor for us. But what we're working on at the local level, besides the Tech Lake initiative, but which is also is inextricably linked, is improving our permitting process, making it easier for startups to come in, know how to get space, know where to connect with capital, and be able to go through the city processes more efficiently, and then be able to work all the way up that scale to our big developers who are coming in and doing incredible projects like the 3 high-rises we have coming up in our downtown right now. We need to make it easier for that to happen.
Great, thank you. I want to move naturally so to a COVID-related question. As a couple of you have stated, the Tribune, I think a week ago, had a great story about Utah's conditions in there and our status. And I think most of us would agree that Utah has weathered this well, in part because of our diverse economy, our preparedness, our rainy day funds, a combination of good government. And we're doing pretty well. But COVID and the recession related one, it's a very interesting and unique kind, right? It's not economy caused, it is healthcare caused. So we do have a recovery that needs to happen. So digging a little beyond the headlines and stipulating that we all agree to Utah's exceptional position, what milestones are you looking for before you think we're in blue sky again? So I'm looking 18, 24 months out perhaps. So what are you looking for milestones? And then what's your assessment of the impact of the pandemic, particularly again to commercial real estate and construction? I'll switch it up this time and start with President Adams.
Thank you. You know, we all know as we're dealing with the pandemic, and I think we learned very quickly in April, many of us know what self-isolation was and those type of things, and I didn't really understand Zoom. But we know that if we isolate, that actually stops the spread of the virus. That's probably undisputed. But the problem with isolation is that we have other challenges that come about. One of those is our mental health. That we actually would do better if we were in the room talking with each other because we are social animals. Our calls to the mental health crisis line have gone up 30%. We've seen people actually who have not gotten their preventative medical care. People coming into the emergency room with ruptured appendixes because they didn't go see their doctor and get the treatment and their medical condition and the severity of their conditions, the acuity levels of those coming into the emergency rooms are much greater. The admissions into the hospitals are greater. So it became very apparent that we just can't deal with this crisis by putting blinders on and simply looking at the virus, that we have to have a balanced approach or a holistic approach. And at the very beginning, we started that approach. And we knew that we had to find a way to not only manage the virus, but we had to manage life. In fact, we had to find a way to continue to live life. And we have right now, we all follow it daily, 459, I think, fatalities from COVID in Utah. I asked, and I've been very involved in infrastructure issues. I'm very aware of things that happen on our freeways. Auto-related fatalities are just over 200 this year. So we have over 200 auto-related fatalities. We have 19,000 deaths every year in Utah. 3,500 to 5,000 of them are pulmonary deaths, about the same in cancer. We're dealing with issues, and we continue to deal with issues for a myriad of years. And what I look for in the future and what we need to do as far as determine whether we're whether we're out of the virus or not, I think it's more important right now that we find a way to deal with it while we're in it. Because I'm not sure, even when we have a vaccine, what the status of the virus is going to be. So in my opinion, rather than look for a milestone or when we're out of it, is to find a way to live with it as we go through this process. And if we do that, we'll be able to manage it well. I mean, 4.1% unemployment rate, the second lowest in the nation. When we were at 4.5, we were the lowest in the nation. There are industries that are still struggling. We need to focus on those, the hotel and hospitality industry. But I think our future is bright. But as we look at milestones, vaccines coming out, herd immunity, all those types of things that we hear out into the future, I think it's really more important that we find a way to live with it while we're in it. So thank you.
Great perspective. Mayor Mendenhall, do you want to add anything to the question of recovery?
Sure, and if I could just send my thoughts and prayers to the President and the First Lady and the 5,000 Utahns who were diagnosed this week. Also, it's not over. We've got a ways to go still, and I send my sincere well wishes to everyone who's been affected. We are in a relatively exceptional position compared to the rest of the nation. Back in July, Salt Lake City had the lowest jobless rate among 51 metropolitan areas in the country with 1 million people or more. We were at 5.3%. We have a strong inward migration, a low vacancy rate, both on homes, commercial, retail, and of course that's being affected right now by the pandemic. So the inequities that have been exposed from the pandemic, which happen with any major crisis, and shine that light on the needs of many people in the community, in the economy, who were not getting the resources that they needed, is a great opportunity for us. And it's one of the benchmarks that we're tracking as we look down the road 18 months. And even in our day-to-day work, how are we doing at connecting the people who keep our economy going every day and who have helped build the strength of this economy, but who have fewer access, or less ease of access to the resources they need to help us recover now and to keep those businesses going. So our economic development team has done an amazing job, has heard from over 700 businesses in Salt Lake City proper who have helped us to shape the policies, like our $1 million emergency loan fund that we put out pretty quickly before the state or the federal funds could become available. But we need to be looking at this opportunity I mentioned a moment ago with the opening of more square footage than we could have anticipated in January in our downtown core and throughout parts of Salt Lake City, and repositioning it so that we're creating flexible workspaces, potentially workspaces that can be used at different times of the day or week by different entities, certainly by different employees. This is going to be evidenced by the kind of transformation that I think we've seen at 95 South State as they've been adapting on the fly with touchless entry systems, amazing HVAC systems, and the kind of security that the businesses that are here today and that are coming here, they're still coming here in the future, are going to say, that's a place where I know that my employees are going to be able to have that hybrid work schedule, if that's the way, and that's the way our corporation is looking like we're going, be able to come in and feel secure in the space that they're in, even if that space is used by someone else on a different day of the week. And so we need to see that adaptation, diversification of who has access to these secure opportunities in our workplace. And Salt Lake City is working as close as we can with the businesses on the ground to make sure that we're adapting the tools we have and working with our real estate partners so that as we come together, we continue to have the strongest economy, and that this continues to be the place that people want to put their roots down and want to invest in.
Great. So I want to stay on the COVID conversation for a second, but I'm going to pick up the theme that the mayor was just hitting on. And I want to talk a little more with Congressman and Mr. Hale about the notion of adaptation, right? The notion of reuse of office space, how we're going to use it differently. And I'd love some speculation on two topics. One is the use of office space, and is it permanent or is it temporary from your point of view right now? And then the second component to the adaptation is the tax policy. And Congressman, you had mentioned that, and I'd love to talk a little bit about what tax shifts are you considering or thinking about now, particularly related to this notion of different uses of commercial and leasing spaces. So I'm going to first throw it to Mr. Hale, and then Congressman Curtis, and then I'll ask if the other two want to weigh in on those or other topics at that time. You could, but so Mr. Hale.
Yes, well, I think that's the big question nowadays. Is this remote working? Is this a fad? Is this something that after things return to normal, everybody's going to be back in the office like normal? My opinion is, I think this is a version of this is going to stick. I don't think we'll be completely remote, but I think we're going to be a lot more remote. Going into this, I was not a fan of remote work. I thought people would go home, stay in their pajamas, play with their dog for a while, get a little bit of work done. But I think what we've seen is we can be very effective remotely. And so I think many businesses are going to require maybe, a couple of days in the office or 3 days in the office, a couple of days at home. And interestingly enough, it helps solve some of the problems we have in our community. For instance, I drove up here today on the freeway from Orem to Salt Lake in 40 minutes. And I mean, I didn't slow down really below the speed limit at all the whole way. And so I think, this is a great opportunity for us to maybe solve some of the congestion we've had on the freeways. Air quality, I will not be at all reluctant in our office on a bad air day to just tell people, stay home, work remotely. We'll do things by Zoom. It's been a successful experiment, and I think that's going to continue to happen. On the other hand, I think I really miss the social aspect of work, being next to my coworkers. So I don't think that you're going to see 100% remote. But the other interesting thing is, I think businesses now are finding that employees don't necessarily have to live next to the mothership. They may allow employees the opportunity to live wherever they want if they have the opportunity to work remotely. I saw a survey that says almost 50% of people working in San Francisco said they would leave if they had the chance. Well, they may have the chance now. I mean, these companies may say to them, we don't care where you live. So is Utah going to see this huge influx of people coming from some of these big cities where they really want to have the outdoor experience that we offer, the quality of life that we experience, and they can live here and still work for their Silicon Valley company or, you know, something like that. So I think it's going to change. I think maybe the pendulum will swing back a little bit, and I think where we're going to end up is somewhere in the middle, with a hybrid type schedule that, in our case in Utah, I think could be really positive because it helps solve some of our problems we've been grappling with.
Thank you, Congressman Curtis.
I just throw out a few comments. It took Congress 40 years to come visit taxes again after the Ronald Reagan Tax Acts. And so I wouldn't bet on tax changes quickly responding to this situation. I think what you will see from Congress is tax incentives still dealing with clean air. Battery storage is one that I'm working on, and I think you can see things like that. But I think as far as office space, likely not. I would like to point out, I represent a number of rural counties, and how powerful this shift can be for rural counties who struggle with employment. And I think to the extent that we can connect the economies of Salt Lake County, Utah County, and counties that are just on fire with some of my counties in rural Utah, this can be a very, very good thing for the state economically, and bring some really strong economic relief to these counties where they don't have to travel up to these businesses to do work. And at the same time, a lot of Salt Lake, Utah County businesses struggle to find employees. Well, I've got employees, qualified, good, trained employees in rural Utah that would love to take these jobs.
That's a great notion, and I want to pause here for a second to reinforce that, because this strategy that I'm hearing more and more from all levels of government about some of the congestion and growth concerns, if we alleviate them within the state, right, and not outside the state, that if we put a 29 county strategy together, as you're suggesting, Congressman Curtis, it helps us with our environmental conditions, it helps us with exporting our kids, and as well. And I love that connection to the access to fiber and remote working. So I appreciate that Utah is starting to look at a shift in strategy to inbound migration. So I'll move now to President Adams. I think you had something to add to this.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in as they talk about remote working. I've got a hotel wall behind me right now. I probably should have had arches, because Oklahoma is pretty sweet this time of year, and I probably should have been outside showing you the great weather and the backdrop and the scenery. But very, very clearly, we're hearing, and I talked to a associate who had just visited San Francisco and Silicon Valley, but they talked about the fact that Utah, the quality of life here is so much better, and we're seeing that right now. We're seeing influx from people deciding that they can live remotely and they can work remotely, and that has its pros and cons. But I think we're going to continue to see that, and I do think the demand here is going to continue to increase. Tax policy wise, I'll just say the state's been very aggressive that way. And for commercial companies or big multi-state companies, we did something about a year ago. We went to a single sales factor tax policy for multi-state companies. And if you understand tax policy, I don't want to get too wonky here, but multi-state companies are taxed potentially on three factors. One is the amount of property they own. The other is the amount of income tax or number of employees they have. And the third is the sales tax volume, or the sales they produce in a state. Utah's got a very small population compared to the rest of the United States. So if you are simply taxed on your sales tax, your sales in Utah are probably low compared to the volume you have around the world if you're a multi-state company. So as we move to a single sales factor, a sales tax, or income tax for companies, that allowed big companies, big multi-state companies, to come in to Utah and pay a much reduced tax rate. And we're seeing that work. And that tax policy does drive behavior. And as we see that happen, whether it's, the repurposing of office space or not, we're seeing economic development beyond what I ever thought. And maybe it's too hot in Utah, but we're seeing Northrop Grumman, and I think most people are familiar with what's going on around Val Hale Air Force Base and the number of employees they're bringing in. We're seeing, again, Silicon Slope still just expanding. We're seeing office space be built there. Regardless of the repurposing, I still think our future in Utah, because of the quality of life we have here, we'll see not only the commercial but the residential demand continue to escalate. The biggest problem I see out in the future is lumber prices doubling, not being able to talk to a contractor the other day, not being able to get storm drain concrete pipe, and not being able to get supplies they need to be able to handle the infrastructure growth.
Great. So I want to switch from the general to the specific. We have two big projects. We have many, but we have two big projects going, have kicked off and are in their active phase in Utah. One is the Point of the Mountain development, which is they're calling the Point, and one is the Utah Inland Port, which the first jurisdictional area is in the western side of mostly Salt Lake City. So I want to talk about those two projects, and I'm going to start with Senator Adams, but where I would like is, so I'm keeping this one really open. You all can decide the composition between the two projects as well, but I would love to know your point of view on them. But I would really like to know, in your mind, what makes this an exceptional generational project? So we know about the economic opportunity, we know about the raw land. Certainly there are infrastructure elements to both of those. I know I'm leaving these broad open, but one of the things I want to key in on is, from your leadership chair, what's going to make these more than just last mile industrial or manufacturing? What's going to be the aha extraordinary part or strategic part of both of these very planned, very purposeful projects? Or,
you know, it is so broad. I could talk for a long time, but I'll try to focus it. But you know, one thing we have learned from COVID, if we haven't learned anything else, and there's nothing so consistent as change. And if we think we have a great economy today and we sit back and just basically relax, we're not going to have a good one tomorrow. And so we have to stay cutting edge. We have to look out into the future. We have to try to get ready. And a great hockey player said he doesn't skate to where the puck is. He skates to where he thinks it's going to be. And that's what we need to do if we're going to be competitive. And we have seen very, very clearly, and I hate to say it because I like brick and mortar, and a lot of us, and I think a lot of those listening have a lot of brick and mortar retail establishments. We've seen a move through COVID to a lot of online sales. If we don't put ourselves in a way to be able to move goods and services around the world through the inland port or through another way to distribute material, we're going to see our economy shrink, because mobility of moving product and be able to move into that new economy. You know, I tell my wife, you got to go down to the store and buy your stuff, because again, I like brick and mortar, invested in it. But the delivery truck shows up every day to our house, and I'm not sure exactly why. But if we're going to look to the future, I believe we're going to have manufacturing jobs here. We have to find a way to have that central port distribution process, because I believe that is the future. And then you look at the Point. I mean, what a great opportunity. We have, you know, as you look around the world, some great land use ideas, how to make the quality of life, and to be able to add density, and to be able to blend density with jobs, and to be able to wipe the slate clean and be able to do a master plan in the middle of a great metropolitan area. The combination of the two, and we look at the tech community, Silicon Slopes, to be able to expand it. Utah's got a great opportunity, and that's another reason why our future is bright, because as we look out into the future, we're trying to leverage the tech industry that we've done so well in developing and look to the future of distribution, and the combination of the two, I think, are pretty powerful.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure. Mayor Mendenhall, you have the port in your community, in your established residential area. So let's hear from you.
And you know, my background is in air quality advocacy. So I actually think that there is a tremendous opportunity when we get real about the facts of our state and our region right now, which we've been talking about. Fastest growing in the nation, population influx, our own population growing, strong economy, low unemployment. We're going to continue to grow. And we see that as we look at the industry growth or decline over the path of this pandemic. The construction industry is continuing. That's a reality. Our people are a reality. And the next reality is that, as President Adams said, we see online sales outpacing brick and mortar sales continuously every quarter. It's growing there. And I think that we're all vulnerable to that. So whether or not we go to the store for diapers or even apple juice anymore is a question mark. I'll say in Salt Lake City, we see that our population really loves local. So while this pendulum swing of ordering online is there, we see people doubling down with local businesses. So when we go out, we want that connection. We want to know who we're supporting, and we want to keep those dollars in our local economy in a bigger way. But when we get real about that growth of online sales and truck deliveries, we look at UDOT's projections without an inland port of over 100% growth through this city in the next 10 years for long-range truck traffic. We look at about 75% growth in short-range truck traffic just through Salt Lake City. Right here is the crossroads of the West. What I hear when I think about those growing transportation numbers is air pollution. That's what we should be planning for and thinking about. So when we look at a rail alternative, not to mention our $4.1 billion new airport, which has a tremendous amount of cargo capacity without growing anything, the inland port could be a tremendous win for our future air quality if we're able to significantly displace the need for much of that truck traffic on our roads, not structure costs. From an air quality perspective, if we can remove some of those future truck trips by moving things in here and out of here on more rail, and which rail, when it's running at its speed, it is far more efficient from an air quality perspective than a truck is. A ton of freight moves much more efficiently by rail than it does by truck. That's an incredible opportunity. Now, Salt Lake City, while we're in pretty comfortable position at the moment with the legislation that overarches the inland port, legislation changes with the whims of the legislature and the relationship with the city and who's in office at the time. We would like to see, and I think for the surety of the growth of the inland port, something more sound than legislative action saying how things are going to go. So I would like us to have these environmental conversations, these legal conversations, and the infrastructure conversations wrapped up into something that looks much more like a contract for the sake of the growth of the port, for the sake of the security of the city and the residents on the west side who are already impacted disproportionately by air pollution. There's an incredible opportunity there.
Great, thank you. Congressman Curtis.
Yeah, I think Mayor Mendenhall has done just an amazing job of articulating her city's needs and the impact. And I want to bring up rural here again. I've got county commissioners, I've got mayors salivating for a piece of this opportunity. And I think if, to go to the air quality issue, let's look at this in a way where these trucks don't even need to go through Salt Lake City. I've got Price, I've got Green River, I've got all these, I've got I-70, I've got all of these assets, I've got airports down there, I've got fiber down there. I'm really excited for the conversation of the inland port to impact rural, how we can do that, maintain clean air, boost the economies in these areas. They're desperately looking for jobs, for opportunities for growth. They are legitimate in their concern that their greatest export is their children. We've got to bring jobs in there to keep those great talented people there. Lots of opportunities. Now, as far as the point, let me just say what an amazing opportunity. Timing, I think, is so good. The world has changed on office space. We get the chance with a blank canvas to build offices that will accommodate a population who doesn't want to come in. The new technology that can be in these buildings to deal with that new world, I think, will be amazing. And combine that with 5G and 5G coming out right on the cusp of the time that these will be developing. I think really makes this development position to be very, very different than anything else in the United States.
Great, thank you. Mr. Hale.
Yes, I'll speak to the point a little bit. I'm co-chair of the Point of the Mountain Commission, and I'm on the State Land Authority Board for the Point of the Mountain. I think this is a tremendous opportunity, as Representative Curtis just mentioned. It's a blank canvas. This is 700 acres that are owned by the state, and so we don't have really a lot of constraints on what we do there. And it's a tremendous opportunity to come up with something that's not just office space, but my vision of this is that this become a place that is really almost an attraction in and of itself, a place where you've got people can live and work close by, but it would be really fun to have some things there that make it a gathering place after hours, you know, where families can come, people can come, and maybe even have some type of iconic art and things there, maybe even some structure that is really attractive and would set Utah apart. It's right now our State Land Authority Board is trying to figure out what we want this property to be. And it's really an interesting process because there's a lot of ideas, but I think we all want to really not be constrained by our creativity, but to get the best thinking in the country as to how to maximize this property. The legislature promised the taxpayers that we would maximize the revenue from this property to help pay for the prison move. And I constantly remind our board of that. I mean, we have to do something that is going to generate revenue for the state, because that was the promise made to taxpayers when the prison was moved. And so that's always in the back of our minds. Now, on a broader scale, that whole Point of the Mountain area there, we've got to get it right transportation wise, because if we mess up transportation, it doesn't matter what else we do, it will be viewed as a failure. And so there are a lot of ongoing conversations about UTA, how we do mass transit. Of course, the freeway construction through there has been, it's eternal and ongoing and probably always will be because it's the pinch point. But anyway, there's tremendous opportunity. I think over the next year and a half, you're going to see a lot of that planning start to come to fruition. You're going to start to see some meat on the bones, and it's going to be really exciting for the state. But we got to do it right, or it'll become a major problem.
Right. So I'm going to flip it a little. Usually, you know, when we have a chance to talk to you all, we have a list of things we want. I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to say, would you have, as I've already said, I think we have a top shelf audience here. A lot of influencers, a lot of people that care about Utah, but are also leaders in commercial real estate and construction industry. So I want to ask you all, what actions would you like to see from this industry, from this community? A variation on that is, are there any changes or perspectives that you would like to see from this sector of the industry? So looking to you to give us some feedback about what you would like to see, or what changes or what actions you would like to see. I'm going to start with Congressman Curtis.
Well, I'll just tell you, the first thing that comes to mind is just how much I want to brag about my state. And if you look at this panel this morning, we all come from this very diverse background, from different political philosophies, from different ways that we influence our state. And I just wish we could bottle what happens here in Utah and spread it across the United States. You notice there hasn't been anything but praise and kindness for each other. And I'm just so proud of my state. And if there's an ask from me, it's that Utah continue to be that light on a hill about how we do work together, how we get things done, how we have civil discourse. And I just want you to know there's hardly a day that goes by that I don't brag about my great state and the people that we have there.
Terrific, thank you. And before I throw it to President Adams, I'm going to remind the audience that we will have a question and answer section. So if you've been thinking of questions, make sure that they get in so that we can ask the panel. President Adams.
Thank you. And again, Congressman Curtis is right. We collaborate very, very well. But as I think about maybe get down into the specifics of things that help this industry, or what I'd like to see in the future, is a lot of times we see legislation that deals with permitting or regulatory processes of real estate or the industry. And sometimes we swing from trying to get municipalities or governing jurisdictions to change their permitting or regulatory processes. And as we swing those, sometimes it comes unintended consequences of putting burdens or expectations that cause maybe some maybe lack of collaboration. And so if I had any ask, it would be to continue to collaborate, because as we look at permitting processes or fees or those type of things, I think it's really important that we all stay focused on one goal, and that is to be able to get projects permitted through the process and delivered, because we know time, we know that the risk of time and the economic challenges of taking extra time, but we know time is money, and especially in these changing economic challenges we're having, we need to make sure that those processes we go through are as efficient and effective as possible. And the way that happens is we continue to collaborate with municipalities and counties and others to make sure that it's done in a way that focuses everyone on that end goal of getting things done. So thank you.
Great. Mr. Hale.
Sorry, Maura,
Yes. Did you say Mayor Mendenhall or Mr. Hale?
it just cut out for me. Pardon me, Val. Go ahead.
I would just like to challenge you on some workforce issues. This morning I was walking with my friend who happens to be the principal of American Fork High School, and we got talking about workers in the construction industry. And, I talked to him about how we have many kids in our schools who don't really want to go on to four-year degrees. They don't want to go to college. They maybe shouldn't go to college because they're not prepared. And I talked about how we have a significant need in the trades, in vocations, in construction, and some of those things where we just can't find workers. And so I would hope that your industry would continue to work with the schools, with education, and get the word out that there are great jobs out there for young people who aren't necessarily looking to go to college and get a four-year degree. And they're really, really well-paying jobs. I mean, I make the comment all the time that all my friends that went into plumbing retired at age 50, and they're living on a houseboat at Lake Powell. They've made a lot more money than I have, and they've, they're enjoying life. They're great jobs. I hope your industry really will push that with the schools and with parents, that you can have a great career and not necessarily be a doctor or a lawyer or, someone with a degree.
Thank you. Mayor Mendenhall.
Thanks. I would say that my invitation is to come and work with us. Ben Collander's team with economic development is, they're amazing. They love to do this work. They want to connect with you. Clark Cahoon, who we stole from the state economic development, is doing an amazing job on our tech initiative. And we want to work with businesses who, in particular, who align with the values that we have in our capital city of working innovatively, working in a sustainable way when we're building together, creating opportunities for our youth to come in, whether it's apprenticeship programs or simply mentoring. There's so many ways that I think don't actually take a lot more creativity than a business who would look at going perhaps into another city that may not be asking for their approach in these certain ways that create that access and create greater equity. We have an incredible amount of potential in the people of Salt Lake City, and we want to work with you. So we're working on our zoning. We're looking at expanding permitted uses. We're working on our system of building services and the way that permitting happens. Know that work is happening in our house, and we want to hear from you in that regard as well. But in terms of recruitment and bringing people in here, let me be your partner. Reach out to me if you don't have my number. Everyone on this panel does. And Ben Collander's team and our economic development, his door's open as well.
Great. I'm going to add to this section a slight variation on participation, which is I know every year for sure President Adams and Mayor Mendenhall have a list of commissions and committees and boards that they have to appoint. And it's always a challenge to get new voices at the table with the government-appointed commissions and boards. Interestingly enough, often are technical and require some planning sense. They don't require experience necessarily, but the skills found in these industries are often particularly germane to boards and commissions of the government authorities. So a great way, I think, to support the work, particularly of political jurisdictions. Again, I know President Adams and Mayor Mendenhall always are looking for new appointments to boards. So that's a great way as well.
And I would even expand that and say, get involved in your local planning commissions or even city councils. That's a great spot to be able to give to your community.
Great. I'm going to throw this open up. So what are your thoughts on possible solutions to the rising construction costs and the effect they're having on development? President Adams or Congressman Curtis.
I'll just weigh in. Tariffs have impacted construction costs, I think, in a pretty significant way, especially structural steel. And I might just add my perspective to what people can expect. I've been on the China task force. There's just 15 of us here. We've spent 5 months or so meeting 3 or 4 times a week, being briefed on a really extensive basis. And my takeaway from that is that things are going to get worse, particularly with China, before they get better. And that we need to start developing alternative supply options, supply channels, and looking at different countries around the world. Because if you're currently dependent on China, that's going to be a really rocky road. And I'm pleased that we have improved our trading relationships with both Mexico and Canada with the new NAFTA. And I would encourage people to look to that trade agreement and find some solace there. And that we're going to continue to work on other trade agreements. But if China is your source right now, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Anyone want to add to that?
No, I just chime in maybe and say, it's a challenge that I think is it's very difficult to solve, but I guess I'm a little bit of an eternal optimist. I've seen things change. We used to use plywood, now we use wafer. We used to use, we had, all the materials are changing. We used to put in concrete pipe for sewer lines, now it's plastic. And I see innovative ways, innovative new products. And I think we have to continue to innovate, find better materials, more cost-effective materials. And as we see shortages like we have today, hopefully they'll emerge. I'm actually an advocate for forest management. It's a little bit political, but I think as we try to manage our forests, though one of the positive consequences of that would be perhaps more lumber and availability of lumber, and lumber prices have doubled recently as we've seen some of the challenges come. So I think there's ways to look again holistically, trying to manage things and to try to take care of our natural resources. But it's going to continue to be a problem, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges we face is, as I mentioned earlier, is we have a great economy in Utah. I'm not as concerned about our economy here as I am about some of the more difficult economies around the nation actually slowing us up or engulfing us as we can't get material or products or have some of their challenges come to Utah.
Okay. Mr. Hale, there was a question about people who already live around the point of the mountain and who are maybe not excited about seeing the development. And what perspective could you bring to those who are worried about that drastic change happening?
Well, as I said, this will be a drastic change because we're going to bring a lot of people to an area that's already congested. And so I think they have a legitimate concern, because if we don't get the transportation right, it's going to really, really make it difficult to get from one county to the other and to move over that point of the mountain area. I think it's always a concern for people who are somewhere where it's growing. My father passed away almost 20 years ago. Last Sunday, we were going through some newspaper articles he had cut out. And my brother held up one and laughed because it was an article about the people in Orem who were complaining that Orem at the time was like 25,000 people, and they were complaining about the growth of Orem. And my dad was one of those who hated to see new growth coming. Well, Orem's 100,000 people now. It's going to come. It's going to come whether we want it or not. The question is, can we do it right? Plan growth that will make it with the least impact possible. That's the goal, and that's the way we need to approach it. That area is going to grow. There's still 20,000 developable acres around the point of the mountain, and it's some of the last remaining developable land in Salt Lake County is down at that end of the county. So the key is, let's get involved in the process. Let's make sure that we do it the best way we can to have the least amount of impact on those residents.
Okay, great. Mayor.
Can I combine a couple of those? I'm seeing also the question about the ski industry, and we know that transportation is one of the biggest issues, pandemic aside, that faces the vitality of our ski industry, both this season and certainly in the years to come. But to the construction cost piece, infrastructure, as we know, and looking at the needs of UDOT's budget year over year from the legislative perspective, infrastructure is so expensive. We're doubling our population. We've been doubling our population along the Wasatch Front for some time now. And it is time that we make the shift, as great cities do and regions, to a more robust public transportation system. And I know that this shift in the transition means a shift in funding as well, potentially. But as we saw with the tickets for transit conversation before COVID, where we started to have private entities coming to the table with my initiative around tickets for transit to say, we see how our business case needs public transit to grow in order to thrive as we continue to see our skyline rise and our populations rise. But I think when we look at a broader scale, that those costs of infrastructure, which are going to continue to go up, could be better balanced in addition to the quality of life, in addition to this dynamic workforce that we had all along, but we're really seeing shine through the demands of this pandemic, where people could work online. As they're on the bus, they can work while they're on the front runner. And I think that kind of investment in expanding the accessibility of our transit not only improves the quality of life and our air quality, it can improve workability. And I think that our workers maybe didn't realize how dynamic they are until we started telecommuting and dealing with this pandemic. But I see wins across the board for our expansion of public transportation.
President Adams, you've been leading the charge to invest in infrastructure in Utah for 15 years. What are you seeing coming in terms of investment?
And the mayor's right on. I think we're going to see changes, but we're going to see broad changes in every aspect of how we commute. But one of the biggest challenges is gas tax does not increase with inflation. It was 24.5 cents back in 1990, whatever, in 1990s. 24.5 cents a gallon. Gas was $1. Now it's $2, $3. It hasn't inflated. We're still 20, 30 cents a gallon. And I think it's a difficult way to fund your infrastructure. So we're going to have to find a new way to fund it. But we're going to see not only public transit change, but as we see our vehicles change, we're going to see the amount of capacity on freeways as we have autonomous vehicles, as we give up maybe control of our vehicles onto the freeway, be able to stack them closer together, reduce some of those fatalities that we talked about earlier. And I think the future of transportation is going to be totally different. We're seeing air taxis and all those type of things come forward. There's going to be a major change in how we commute and how we get around in our quality of life. And I do that our future is so dang bright. Even with COVID, I think we need to stay and look beyond perhaps this moment of challenge we're in. But I think we have a very, very bright future, and especially in commercial real estate.
Thank you. With less than a minute to go, so this is a 20-second answer, I'm going to unfairly ask Mayor Mendenhall to give some feedback about green building and investment in, broadly said, investment in green buildings or the price of them.
I'll simply say that it has never been more affordable to build in a sustainable way, and that those technologies, because it ends up, when it's done right, having cost savings to the developer and to the occupant in perpetuity, environment aside, that is a case that's getting easier and easier to make, and that Salt Lake City is willing to invest with you. And we recognize that some of those investments can have cost increases, and we want to come to the table with you in those cases where there's a public benefit that we can find.
Great.
Is that 20 seconds?
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes. Thank you so much. This was terrific. I'll turn it to AJ.
Maura, thank you so much for moderating today's discussion, and Congressman Curtis, President Adams, Mayor Mendenhall, Mr. Hale, can't thank you enough for your time and your input this morning. It's invaluable. We appreciate you. Thank you again to our title sponsor today, FFKR, as well as to the Salt Lake Chamber for co-sponsoring this event with us. And thank you all for tuning in. We hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. Thanks again.